November 22. One of our formative heroes died, C.S. Lewis.
Yes.
And we want to talk about that for a few minutes. I have, and I think you do too, a really pretty profound appreciation and affection for C.S. Lewis. Who was he? And what I'm fishing for here is just your favorite way of kind of, if somebody does never heard of him in Manhattan and you say, he really made a big impact on my life and they want to know who he is, what would you say?
Well, I would say he was actually a world-class scholar of English literature. He wrote his survey of English literature of the 16th century is still, the one to go for. He was an expert on medieval literature. So he was a world-class scholar in his own right. And he was a Christian layman who was unusually wise about getting Christianity across to other people. So he spoke as though he was not a theologian, he always said. But because he understood texts and how to read texts, and because he was such a brilliant man, he's still pretty difficult to beat at this point, I think, at just in a vivid way getting across Christianity in a way that's palatable to thoughtful people.
So how did he find his way into your life or you into his work?
Yes. Well, my wife, Kathy, became a Christian largely through reading the Narnia Chronicles.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
When she was about 10 or 11 years old. And if you know Kathy, you know that she's not a passive person. So she wrote him. She started writing him, telling him how wonderful his letters were, his Chronicles of Narnia were. Yeah. He wrote her back 4 times because he always wrote back.
You got those letters?
I have those letters.
That's
and they were remarkable. He didn't talk down to her. He recognized that she was like an 11 or 12-year-old American girl. And that, to her, cemented him as her Christian mentor. When I met Kathy, she just snowed me with C.S. Lewis books. And I'd already met one man.
So you didn't know him at that time?
Yes, I did, because I met a man who was, when I became a Christian, there was through InterVarsity Fellowship in my college, an older young man, he seemed older to me, who was a leader in the fellowship, had become a Christian reading Mere Christianity. So I'd heard of him and read a little bit of it, but my Kathy just says, we cannot have a relationship unless you read this. And she actually wrote a senior thesis at Allegheny College, a senior thesis, undergraduate, called C.S. Lewis's Mythopoeic View of Literature. And this was like 1971. So she was ahead of the curve on American interest in C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, interesting. So that was college years when that was happening, your introduction to Lewis?
Yes. I mean, I got to know her just as we went off to Gordon Conwell Seminary. I knew her sister in college. So through her sister, I started reading C.S. Lewis books even before I actually got to know Kathy.
So do you fix Lewis as a period piece in your life? In other words, he had a huge shaping influence at a period in time, or do you think of Lewis as ongoing? Your relationship is till this day.
Ongoing, for 2 reasons, John. One is, because Lewis was at the heart of Oxford and Cambridge, which was really the heart of the English-speaking intellectual world, it is astounding, and you know this too, how in the 30s and 40s he saw where Western civilization was going. He was remarkable in the abolition of man. He is remarkable in anticipating what now is called postmodernism. He is not a period piece intellectually, in spite of the fact that he was a man of his time in certain ways, no doubt about that. Everybody is, we will be seen that way just pretty soon. But he really knew it was on the way, and he's not talking to intellectual trends that are dated and gone now.
Yeah.
He really. The other thing, of course, is that he is just he's a man of the imagination, and I'll just tell you this interesting. I read recently a comparison. It was an essay compared 4 books: Mere Christianity, Basic Christianity, Reason for God, and N.T. Wright's Simply Christian. So, John Stott.
Yeah.
I was honored.
Yeah,
but
you should be.
But said this, that Mere Christianity uses about 5 times more illustrations and images and pictures than these other 3 books, which are largely abstract. I mean, the charge was that these other books were rather abstract. Yeah. So at least I was in there with John Stott and N.T. Wright as having been, an abstract thinker.
Right. So I hear at least two important influences there. Let's take them one at a time. The cultural engagement piece. What was it about the way he went about it that has influenced you, or that would be helpful for us to discern? Because you said it wasn't as though he tackled dated issues, and when the issue went away, he went away.
Right.
But rather, he did something that we're still benefiting from today in our engagement. So how did he do that?
Well, he not only did that, but he did it imaginatively. So, for example, he said, he says what's happening today is that everyone wants to, he didn't use the word deconstruct, but he says every time somebody says this is right or this is wrong, this is true, people try to say, well, that's really just this. It's just a power play. It's really just your cultural perspective. It's just really, and he says they try to see through it. Instead of saying yes, they want to see through it and take it apart. Then he uses this illustration. He says, the point of seeing through a window is so you can see the garden beyond. The window's transparent. You know this illustration?
Sounds familiar, but go ahead.
He says the garden is not. So he says the point of seeing through
right.
something is only so you can see something else.
Yes.
But he says if you could see through everything, a transparent world would be to be blind. And so his last line is, to see through everything is the same as not to see.
Yeah.
To take everything apart, be cynical about everything is the same as not to see. Now, that not only is absolutely crucial for our moment.
Yeah.
Because people right now, I know, are afraid to say anything because everything is going to be torn apart, no matter what. It's just this, it's just that. But to so vividly say it's like being blind, nobody's ever said it as well as that. It's in the Abolition of Man somewhere, I forget.
Right.
So he combined a knowledge of intellectual trends with this wonderful ability to speak pictorially. And in that sense, he could have been a pretty good preacher.
Did he tackle specifics in his day? I mean, we have the specific today of abortion or of so-called same-sex marriage or health care issues or trafficking issues or racial prejudice issues. These are hot-button issues that evangelicals feel the need to address. Did he do that sort of thing?
Well, I think what he was finding the proto, you might say, the sort of the preliminary trends that have led to where we are. There's this one place in the last of his space trilogy, that hit his strength, where he was somebody who is brought into what's called the objective room. And in the objective room, there's a man who's being brought into the inner circle of this very evil group, and they say, "We want you to step on a picture of Jesus." And basically, he says, "Well, wait a minute. What's so big about Jesus? Isn't it all just, isn't that just poppycock anyway? All that religion stuff." He says, "Well, because you came from a Christian, because of Christendom, if you're really going to be totally objective and free from all this poppycock, you have to particularly be angry at Christianity." It's very intriguing. So he wasn't dealing with the specific examples that we have today, but he was looking at the trends that, I don't know, he knew where they were going to go, but he's dealing with those trends. And that's the reason why I find in some ways he goes back to the source and helps me not just look at attack the specific manifestation of the problem, but to go at the underlying mindset.
So I was going to ask, go ahead and say just a bit more about that, because I think you're good at that. I think that's what you tend to do. Somebody asks you a question about this issue, and you have a way of dealing with the feeder beliefs here, or whatever they are, that are making that an issue. Because if you only say wrong because of this, then when that goes away, that significant moment goes away.
Yes.
So how did he have an effect on the way you do that?
I think so. A more famous passage in Abolition of Man, where he says, for the ancients, the cardinal problem was how to conform your life to the way the world is, and the solution was virtue and wisdom. Today, the point is to try to conform the world to our desires, and the answer is a technique. So the ancient times, the idea was, how do I see how God has made the world, and wisdom is adapting to that. And now we're going to remake the world the way we want, and the solution is a technique. And that's, Jacques Ellul with Technological Society, if you read his book on that, you see that is the problem. We especially tend to now talk about technology very, very positively, because it is positive in many ways, medical technology, communication technology. But people like Lewis were recognizing technique as an idol, as an idol, basically, a way for us to say we can make the world whatever we want it to be. That's the sort of thing that he helped me see.